All right, this is DIDDLES for those of you who wanted some extra help and if you're not understanding the notes on your own. So the acronym itself: diction, imagery, detail, language, and syntax. Make sure you're filling this out in your guided notes. So diction is word choice. The words that we choose matter. So you have to consider what words were chosen, why were they chosen, and then what connotation do they have? So if we look at connotation, if you have written something for me, right? I'm looking at an assignment that you've turned in and I say that it's good, that's fine, right? The connotation there is fine. You don't have to worry about it. If I say it's excellent though, you know it's even better. You can be excited about it. If I say it's acceptable, we're kind of going south on that one, right? Like, okay, like you did fine, but it could have been better. If I say it's adequate, I don't know why that one seems so much worse, but to like hear that it was adequate is not a positive, right? Even though the word itself doesn't mean anything negative. And then if you hear outstanding, you know that you've gone above and beyond. You did the best in the class. Okay, so diction, your word choice matters. All right, we've got, if any of you have ever seen this wonderful film, Dead Poets Society, he says, avoid using the word very because it's lazy. A man is not very tired, he is exhausted. Don't use very sad, use morose. Language was invented for one reason, boys, to woo women, and in that endeavor, laziness will not do. So the words that we choose make us sound either more or less educated, might get a different point across, can change the way that we imagine what's happening in a story or narrative, so the word choice does matter. All right, imagery. That's when we're engaging the senses. So if it helps you to see, hear, taste, smell, I probably forgot one. You'll have to figure out what the last one is if I did. Okay, so what images are used? What senses do they summon? Okay, so, look, there they are. Hear, feel, see, smell, taste. All right, our example: streaks of light swam and danced and wavered like a bright mirage, and over everything was the clean, sweet smell of the water and its weeds. The chatter of a swooping kingfisher, the carol and trill of a dozen other kinds of bird, and occasionally the thrilling bass note of an unastonished bullfrog at ease somewhere along the muddy banks. So if we look at this, the images that we have used are the streaks of light, right? We can imagine those streaks of white and how they wave and dance over something, right? That's something that we can see in our mind's eye. And over everything was the clean, sweet smell of the water and its weeds. So if you've ever been by a body of water, then you can imagine what that smelled like. The chatter, right? Sound. We're supposed to be able to hear those swooping kingfisher. The carol, again, a sound. And trill, a sound of a dozen other kinds of birds. And occasionally the thrilling bass note of an unastonished bullfrog at ease somewhere along the muddy banks. So instead of simply telling us that there was a bullfrog sitting by the side of the riverbank, we get to imagine it, see it, hear it, smell it, right? And it just adds to the imagery, makes it more engaging to read a passage if we add some type of imagery. We engage the senses. All right, detail, making the writing come alive. What details are used? What do they imply? And then what details are left out, because sometimes leaving something out very purposefully can get the reader to think about it more. And then what is the effect of these choices? So some of the details that we could include are facts, observations, reasons, examples, incidents, anecdotes, any of those things that we could add to it. So here's an example from literature. I rounded the hut and saw a man's dead body sprawling in the mud. The elephant had come suddenly upon him round the corner of the hut, caught him with its trunk, and put its foot on his back and ground him into the earth. He was lying on his belly with arms crucified and head sharply twisted to one side. His face was coated with mud, the eyes wide open, the teeth bared and grinning with an expression of unendurable agony. That's from George Orwell's Shooting an Elephant. Very sad story. Don't read it. Okay, so the details that are included in this, instead of telling us the elephant killed the man, right? That's the gist of what happened here. But instead of just the elephant killed the man, he describes the way that it looked to him so that we can figure out for ourselves that the man was killed by the elephant. So he tells us first that he comes around the corner and sees the man's dead body sprawling in the mud. So we do know there's a dead guy. The elephant had come suddenly upon him around the corner of the hut, caught him with its trunk, and put its foot on his back and ground him into the earth. I don't know about you, but what I imagine is like, you know how people will like grind their cigarette butts into the concrete? I picture an elephant doing that to a person. He was lying on his belly with arms crucified and head sharply twisted to one side. So we know if it's sharply twisted that that can be fatal, right? So without having to tell us, we know that he is dead once again. His face was coated with mud, the eyes wide open. Again, not a good sign. The teeth bared and grinning with an expression of unendurable agony. So this grinning comes back to the idea of diction. Choosing to say grinning, that juxtaposition of like usually we grin when we're happy, and instead he's grinning in agony and pain because he was killed ruthlessly, is the purpose of the details of the diction of the imagery here, right? See how these all start to come together to make a well-rounded and more engaging piece. That's the purpose here. Okay, language for the audience. How could the language be described? How does the language affect the reader's mood? We have informal language, formal language, slang, jargon, colloquial, clinical, academic. Okay, so our examples. When Dad sees my grade and finds out that I goofed off in class, he is really going to blow his top. When my father discovers that my lack of focus in class led to my poor grade, he will be enraged, right? This first example is much more informal. It uses slang, right? Whereas the second one sounds very academic, very formal, right? When my father discovers my lack of focus, using the word father instead of dad, lack of focus instead of goofed off in class led to my poor grade, he will be enraged. How many teenagers do you hear saying things like enraged, right? So the language changes the mood of how you're reading it, right? Informal, relaxed slang as opposed to very formal, so on and so forth. This is just for all of us always. The arrow affected the aardvark, right? It stabbed him. The effect was eye-popping. Okay, language continued. So this is for the atmosphere. How could the language be described? How does the language affect the reader's mood? So we've got plain, simple, ornate, figurative, poetic, a lot of different ways that we can use language to create atmosphere. Syntax is the structure of the grammar. So how do the sentences vary in length and structure? How do they create a flow to the piece? Is punctuation used to get across the intended point? So dear John, here's a little letter. I want a man who knows what love is. All about you are generous, kind, thoughtful people who are not like you. Ooh. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me. For other men, I yearn. For you, I have no feelings whatsoever. When we're apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be? Yours, Gloria. Okay, so this letter is not a love letter, right? This is a breakup letter. Gloria's no longer interested in John. Let's see how changing the sentence length and structure, the flow, using punctuation can totally change the meaning. So if we have, Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous, kind, thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours? Gloria. You can go back and look at it. It's the same letter, same words. All we did was change the punctuation and the flow of it, and it becomes a love letter. So keep in mind that your grammar does matter, and the grammar in literature when you're reading it does matter. It should be purposeful to get a certain point across. Let's eat grandma is a bad thing, right? Let's eat grandma. Or let's eat, comma, grandma means let's have dinner, right? Punctuation saves lives. I like cooking my family and my pets. Ooh, that's no good. Use commas. Don't be a psycho. All right. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I would be happy to help with any questions.